Some long tail variations. Today, in this demonstration, I'm using two colors of yarn tied together as a single loop, so it's easier for you to see which is the thumb yarn and which is the index finger yarn, or which is the primary cast on, which is the first row. In all the demonstrations, I'll use the lighter color as the primary cast on and the dark as the second. One standard version of long tail, often called the slingshot version, starts like this. The yarn is grabbed and then split, and then the needle pulled forward. This creates a sort of slingshot shape. You go into the thumb, there's the simple cast on, pick up a stitch, bring the stitch through that simple cast on, and then snug up the simple cast on. So we have a simple cast on with a stitch. And you can clearly see the simple cast on in gold, and it creates these commas, and the stitch row done in the darker color. But there's a lot of different ways of doing the long tail cast on. If you hold the yarn in the right hand, and I don't, so this is a little awkward for me, you can form the stitch with the thumb, using the thumb almost as a left-hand needle. Make this first row, pull the stitch off, tighten up. So again, using the thumb, make a simple cast on the thumb, put the needle into the thumb stitch, wrap the yarn to create a stitch, bring it over. If you were knitting, you would twist it that way and pull it off. You wouldn't remove your thumb, you'd pull the needle out. Another variation of this simple technique is to do the same thing on your index finger. Use your index finger almost as a left needle, wrap the stitch round, bring the stitch over, and snug up. The results of these methods are basically identical. There's a slight tension difference that you can see, but that's mostly because I'm not used to using this technique and not used to using the yarn in my right hand. But let's see some other ways to create a long tail cast on. This method is called the two needle method. Again, I have two strands of yarn. My tail yarn is in the back, my ball yarn is in the front. I'm going to create the first row with the tail yarn and then the second row with the darker yarn. In this one, the yarn starts at the back, and if you have a simple slip knot, you'll have to position it to the back. You bring it as a yarn over. The other yarn that is taken in front of this yarn over, and a second yarn over is made. There are now two stitches on the needle, a light and a dark, and both of them are really very simple yarn overs. Secure the stitches in your hand and take a second needle. And then lift the first stitch over the second stitch and snug it up. And repeat. Yarn over. Front yarn crosses in front of the yarn over, comes to the back, makes a second yarn over. Using the needle, lift the stitch over, in effect to cast it off, and repeat. Yarn over from the back to the front. Yarn in front, crosses over, comes to the back, also makes a yarn over. And now, using the tip of the needle, bring the one stitch over. You might say this doesn't much look like a long tail, but if you look at the back of a long tail, you'll see, oh really, it does look very much the same. And if I turn it round, you'll see we have those same comma stitches that are so common and frequent in long tail. Now, there is a slight difference, and if we pull the two things together, you can see it, which is that this comma goes up and this comma goes down. So it is a slightly different version of the long tail. But once you take it in hand to knit, you'll notice the purl side is at the back and the knit side is at the front, as in most long tails. So there's one way to do a long tail that you might not have known. A two needle long tail. Let's pursue it again. The tail yarn is in the back and wrapped to the front. The ball yarn crosses in front of it, brought to the back, and a second yarn over is made. The second needle is picked up and used to cross one stitch over the other. Both yarns are gently snugged. From the back to the front, crossing over, snugging. A slightly different edge to the long tail in terms of how it's wrapped, but other than that, it's the same long tail. So there's another method of doing long tail. Another method for long tail is called an open loop long tail. An open loop long tail starts similar to a slingshot, but the yarn is held reversed. So we have here an open loop, a giant U, not a crossed ribbon as we normally have. There's the cross, no cross. So it's almost like a yarn over. Then a stitch is made and the yarn over is snugged up. So again, open loop, pick up a stitch, snug it up. Open loop, pick up a stitch, snug it up. Open loop, pick up a stitch, snug it up. One advantage to this version of long tail, it creates the same upward slant. So this upward slant is very similar to this yarn over, our open loop, and our stitch. The result of these two methods is identical. It's another version of long tail. If you know several versions of long tail, you're much more likely to find one that works for you.